I'm Nima Rajan. Mary May Simon is making her first international trip as Canada's new Governor-General. Mary Simon's 4-day state visit will include a meeting with Chancellor Angela Merkel. She will also represent Canada at the 2021 Frankfurt Book Fair. A statement from Rideau Hall says Canada and Germany have long been allies and friends, and that the visit highlights shared values and strong ties. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be in Kamloops, BC today. This comes weeks after he apologized to an Indigenous chief for not accepting her invitation to an event marking Canada's first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. He will visit the TK'EMLUPS SECWEPEMC Nation. The First Nation announced last May it had found what are believed to be some 200 unmarked graves at the site of the former Kamloops Indian Residential School. Numerous Indigenous nations have since reported finding unmarked graves at other former residential schools. In the next redrawing of federal ridings, Quebec will lose a seat, but overall the number of seats in the House of Commons will grow by 4, making 342. Quebec's 78 MPs will be reduced to 77. This is the first time since 1966 that a province has lost a seat when the electoral map is reconfigured. Alberta will get 3 more seats, making 37. British Columbia will get 1 more seat, making 43, and Ontario will add 1 seat, making 122. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says the annual pace of housing starts in September fell compared with August. The National Housing Agency says the seasonally adjusted annual rate of housing starts last month was down 4.4% from August. The annual pace of urban starts fell 4.5% in September. New data from the Bank of Canada shows workers are more willing to leave their jobs in search of new work, and businesses are working harder to attract talent. Companies that took part in the central bank's quarterly Business Outlook survey also say they will pass higher payroll and higher shipping costs on to customers. Combined, almost half of businesses surveyed expect the pace of price increases to stay above 3% over the next 2 years. Global Affairs says it is aware of media reports that a Canadian citizen has been kidnapped in Haiti. An email statement from the government agency says Ottawa is working with local authorities. It goes on to say that the Government of Canada's first priority is always the safety and security of its citizens. It says due to the provisions of the Privacy Act, no further information can be disclosed. The Canadian is among 17 missionaries, including their children, who have been abducted. This is the same gang blamed for kidnapping 5 priests and 2 nuns earlier this year. They were later released. The Minnesota Department of Natural Resources says Calgary-based ENBRIDGE has failed to meet a deadline. This is for cleaning up a site where an aquifer ruptured during construction of its Line 3 oil pipeline. The company says it is working with the DNR to correct uncontrolled groundwater flows. Minnesota has already ordered ENBRIDGE to pay $3.32 million for failing to follow environmental laws and will now demand further compensation. A senior military commander said he is not expecting there will be much opposition from the Canadian Forces personnel over mandatory vaccinations. The federal government announced a new mandatory vaccine policy that will require federal public servants to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 by the end of the month. Brigadier General Bill Fletcher, the commander of Western Canada's 3rd Canadian Division, says over 90% of Canadian military personnel are already double vaccinated. He says he is not worried about any pushback from what he calls a small percentage. A recent Restaurants Canada survey found that half of restaurant operators say their employees have experienced hostile confrontations over vaccine certificate rules. Restaurant staff enforcing vaccine certificate programs say they face verbal abuse, sexual harassment, and racism from some customers. In response, some restaurant operators have hired security guards to review vaccination records and identification before allowing customers to sit at a table. The survey also found that 20% of restaurants have lost staff, and more than 60% say they need to hire more workers. Numerous arrests have been reported after large and rowdy unsanctioned homecoming parties near Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, and Acadia University in Wolfville, Nova Scotia. In Wolfville, the RCMP confirms that arrests were made and fines were handed to students who gathered by the hundreds on the town's streets and in backyards. In Kingston, Ontario, a police officer was taken to hospital after something was thrown from a large, unruly crowd near Queen's University. Police confirmed numerous arrests were made there as well. All right, we'll be back after the break with a look at Alberta's municipal election and the big referendum questions. We'll have an interview with political commentator Vitor Marciano up next. And of course, after that, we'll bring you news from across Canada and from around the world. So stay tuned to the Forum Daily News. We'll be right back after a short break. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says today's referendum on the federal equalization program is about whether or not Alberta should push hard to get a fair deal. The question for voters who are also heading to the polls in municipal elections is whether the section of the Constitution that enshrines the principle of equalization payments should be removed. If that was not enough, Albertans are also being asked if they should get rid of daylight savings time. And of course, Alberta's two major cities will be getting new mayors. Well, to walk us through this busy day for Alberta is Mr. Vitor Marciano, political commentator and analyst. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Pleasure to be here.
So let's start with the big referendum on equalization, sir. What is it exactly, and what are Albertans being asked to vote on?
It's a bit of a symbolic vote that actually starts a not symbolic process. Albertans are being asked to vote on a constitutional change that would remove equalization from the Constitution. But I think Albertans know that the entire idea behind this is that that is the opening position in a series of constitutional negotiations that we hope Alberta and the rest of Canada will have over the next several years.
And we know equalization has long been part of the political conversation in Alberta, but would you say that voters themselves are clear on what this referendum is about and the impact of their vote?
Well, I think there have been a few opponents to the equalization vote that have tried really hard to make it less clear. The actual question's a little complicated, and the opponents are trying to create an impression that this is a vote on the principle of equalization. Albertans know that equalization is a bad thing. It's opposed across the political spectrum. Even a clear majority of New Democratic voters think that equalization is unfair to Alberta. And I think most Albertans understand that voting yes on this referendum starts a process that will either lead to repeal or reform of equalization. I don't think any Albertan thinks that they're voting to make it go away and it'll go away tomorrow if there's a 51% vote to make it go away.
All right, sir. Now, considering that this equalization formula is a matter of federal jurisdiction, you're saying this provincial vote is more of a symbolic vote, but what would you say is the end goal of this referendum question?
Well, it's symbolic, and yet it opens the door to constitutional discussions. What will happen after this vote is if it passes, the legislature of Alberta will pass a motion requesting constitutional negotiations on this question. And that puts an obligation on the federal government and the other provinces to come together for constitutional discussions on this matter. One province can't change the Constitution by itself. It is an item inside the federal jurisdiction, but there are legal precedents that suggest that if a province votes strongly on a constitutional matter, the other provinces have an obligation to act on it. So this starts the ball rolling on constitutional discussions. And once constitutional discussions begin, who knows where they'll end up.
All right, Mr. Marciano, just about 2 minutes left here, but how do you expect this referendum to affect relations with the federal government and other provinces moving forward?
I think the federal government's going to try hard to ignore it for a while. I think other provinces are going to be kind of uncertain as to how to comment. But I also think that over the next 18 to 24 months, you're going to see provinces, especially the smaller provinces all over Canada, wanting to have bigger constitutional type discussions with the federal government. The provinces are all going to start running out of money. COVID and its impact on healthcare and its impact on seniors care is just this great big sucking vortex that's stealing everybody's money. And there's going to be an awful lot of attention on the part of provinces to doing something about it. And one of the ways to do something about it is to open up constitutional discussions.
All right, sir. Well, we'll definitely have to keep an eye on that. But jumping to another referendum question here, daylight savings time. Why is ending daylight savings time a referendum question in the first place, sir?
It's kind of a weird thing. It's been discussed a little bit in Alberta politics. The New Democrats have talked about maybe doing a referendum on it. Jason Kenney wanted to have more than one referendum on it. So now what we're facing is a vote on whether or not to stay with permanent summertime, permanent daylight time. And I honestly have no idea how that vote's going to go. Okay, if you're a morning person, you're against it. If you're an evening person, you're for it. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
All right, sir, just a quick 45 seconds left here, but two major cities are also going to be getting new mayors. So what were the major issues in Calgary and Edmonton this election?
In some ways, these were two elections without major issues. They both ended up sort of being elections about the personality of the two frontrunners in each city. And it's sort of are you going to be more conservative, fiscally conservative, or more socially progressive? Those are the two opponents in both of the cities. It's going to be hard to sort of figure out, but yeah, it's going to have a big impact. I mean, two new mayors, two major cities, all decided on the same night, going to change the future of Alberta in some ways.
Lots to look out for today, sir. Thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll be back after the break with a look at stories from across Canada, so stay tuned. Just a short break. The Hong Kong Department of Health has banned direct flights from Vancouver operated by Air Canada for 2 weeks in response to COVID-19 cases. A statement posted to the department's website says health officials detected nearly 60 imported cases in the first 2 weeks of this month. This includes one passenger on an October 13th Air Canada flight from Vancouver. It says another passenger had failed to comply with disease prevention and control requirements. This prompted officials to implement the ban, which will remain in effect until October 26th. Air Canada notes that its Toronto to Hong Kong flights are not affected. The legal rights to the name of an elusive British Columbia lake monster have been transferred to an area's Indigenous nations. Vernon Mayor Vitor Marciano says City Council voted unanimously to transfer the copyright it held to the name Ogopogo to the Okanagan Nation Alliance. He says the transfer made good sense because the legend of Ogopogo comes from the Okanagan Silk people. Ogopogo is said to inhabit Okanagan Lake, but sightings and photos of the creature have so far remained inconclusive. Operation Red Nose will not be held in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, or Alberta this year due to high COVID-19 numbers. Operation Red Nose is a nonprofit organization that promotes responsible behavior. They provide a volunteer chauffeur service to help prevent impaired driving over the Christmas holidays. A statement from the organization says the current public health situation means it has no choice but to push the service to next year. Alberta's two major cities are to bring in new mayors during municipal elections today. This comes after Naheed Nenshi led in Calgary and Don Iveson led in Edmonton for multiple terms. Political scientists have said the votes will show whether the two cities will continue the progressive legacies of the outgoing mayors or if they will forge ahead with a more conservative vision. Albertans will also be facing referendum questions on the federal equalization program and daylight time on the ballot. The union representing faculty at the University of Manitoba launched a 3-day strike vote over the weekend. The University of Manitoba's Faculty Association said last month that members were looking for raises to bring their salaries closer to those at other Canadian universities. They've been without a contract since April. The university is offering faculty a 3-year deal with salary increases of 0.75%, 0.75%, and 1% starting this year. Ontarians vaccinated against COVID-19 can now download their enhanced certificates, which include a QR code. The Ontario government has said these scannable documents will allow for faster entry into settings that require proof of full vaccination. The enhanced system officially takes effect on Friday. But Ontarians can get their new vaccine certificates before then, and businesses can start using a new app to verify those codes. Ontario reported 443 new cases of COVID yesterday, and that 83% of Ontarians ages 12 and up have now received 2 doses of COVID vaccine. The World March of Women's 5th International Day of Action has wrapped up with events in Quebec. The Quebec Coalition of the World March of Women asked the province to institute systemic change at a rally that brings the 7-month-long event to a close in Montreal. Quebec's coalition used the occasion to demand better protection of Indigenous women, the end of racial profiling, and to increase funding toward eliminating violence against women. The World March of Women began in Quebec and has since spread internationally. Mounties in Newfoundland and Labrador have issued a warning about a new telephone scam. RCMP and Twillingate say they have received complaints about scammers calling from a local number claiming to be an employee of a cable TV company. They tell the victim they'll be eligible for a special COVID-19 rebate if they provide their social insurance number, driver's license, name, and date of birth. Police say no such rebate exists, and they're cautioning the public to be wary of sharing personal information with unknown callers. Nova Scotia's new premier is responding to critics across the aisle who are already accusing his progressive Conservatives of failing to deliver an affordable housing plan. Team Houston says his government will unveil its plan to deal with the province's housing crisis later this week. The shortage of affordable housing was a major issue during the recent provincial election campaign. A memorial service was held in Halifax on Sunday to pay tribute to peace officers who have died while on duty. It is the 39th year for the service, which was held at the Grand Parade in front of City Hall. Peace officers, first responders, and military personnel marched from police headquarters to Gottingen Street to Grand Parade prior to the service at 1 p.m. local time. Dan Kinsella, the chief of the Halifax Regional Police, says the service provides a somber reminder of the exceptional role that police officers have in the community. We'll be right back after the break with a look at stories from around the world, only on Forum Daily News, so stay tuned. Just a short break, and we'll be right back. Britain's House of Commons made a somber return today from a 3-week break. Prime Minister Boris Johnson led tributes in Parliament to Sir David Amess, a Conservative lawmaker stabbed to death last week while he met constituents. The attack on Friday shocked Britain, and it has fueled concern about politicians' safety and the level of vitriol directed at them. A 25-year-old British man with Somali heritage is being held under the Terrorism Act on suspicion of murder. Facebook plans to hire 10,000 workers in the European Union over the next 5 years to work on a new computing platform. The company said in a blog post Sunday that those high-skilled workers will help build the metaverse, a futuristic notion for connecting people online that encompasses augmented and virtual reality. Facebook executives have been touting the metaverse as the next big thing after the mobile internet. Chinese government data shows the world's second-largest economy grew by 4.9% over a year earlier in July to September. This is down from the previous quarter's 7.9%. Factory production, retail sales, and investment in construction and other fixed assets all weakened. Construction, an industry that supports millions of jobs, has slowed since regulators tightened control last year over borrowing by developers. Manufacturing was also hampered in September by power cuts imposed by some major provinces to avoid exceeding official conservation goals. The trial has opened for 2 men charged with murder in the killing of Dutch crime reporter Peter R. de Vries. The journalist was gunned down in the center of Amsterdam on July 6th in a brazen attack that sent shockwaves throughout the Netherlands. Dutch police say the suspected gunman is a 21-year-old Dutch man, while a 35-year-old Polish man is accused of being the getaway driver. They were both arrested shortly after Mr. de Vries was shot on an Amsterdam street after making one of his regular appearances on a Dutch television show. He died 9 days later. Amazon's audiobook service, Audible, and phone apps for reading the holy books of Islam and Christianity have disappeared from the Apple Store in mainland China. The steps are the latest examples of the impact of China's tightened rules for internet firms. Audible said on Friday that it removed its app from the Apple Store in mainland China last month due to what it described as permit requirements. The makers of apps for reading and listening to the Quran and the Bible say their apps have also been removed from Apple's China-based store at the government's request. The Taliban win in Afghanistan is giving a boost to militants in neighboring Pakistan. The Pakistani Taliban, known as the TTP, have become emboldened in tribal areas along the border with Afghanistan. They hope to regain control in these areas that were lost in an offensive by the Pakistani military nearly 7 years ago. Taliban rule in Afghanistan also fuels the mix of radical religious parties in Pakistan. Polls show wide support for a Taliban-style government. Islamabad is trying to open negotiations with the TTP, but that risks stoking the group's ambitions. Russia's foreign minister says that the country is suspending its mission to NATO. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Monday that the move is in response to last week's expulsion by NATO of 8 members of Russia's mission to the military alliance. NATO said that they were secretly working as intelligence officers. Mr. Lavrov also announced that NATO's military liaison and information offices in Moscow will be closed. A pilot project at a geothermal plant near El Salvador's Tecapa volcano is aimed at mining Bitcoin. The pilot project has inspired a rash of volcano emojis from President Nayib Bukele. He made Bitcoin legal tender in September and promised cheap, renewable energy for so-called Bitcoin mining. Mr. Bukele and others say El Salvador's geothermal resources could be a solution to the high electricity use and a large carbon footprint of Bitcoin mining. Prince William was joined by celebrities at the inaugural award ceremony of his Earthshot Prize. It's an ambitious environmental program aimed at finding new ideas and technologies to fight climate change. In a shot pre-recorded video, Prince William said, quote, "We are alive in the most consequential time in human history." The ceremony comes days ahead of the COP26 UN Climate Change Summit in Glasgow, which begins on October 31st. Well, it's official. Lucy is in the sky with diamonds. A NASA spacecraft named Lucy has rocketed into the sky carrying diamonds on a 12-year quest to explore 8 asteroids in Jupiter's orbit. The Trojan asteroids are thought to be the pristine leftovers of planetary formation. Lucy will travel nearly 4 billion miles before reaching its 8th and final target in 2033. The spacecraft has a disk made of lab-grown diamonds for one of its science instruments. I'm Nima Rajan, and this was Forum Daily News.